speech, Minister.
Thank you, Count Corla. And Deputy Healy-Rae, you've very helpfully set out the difficulty in relation to hospital beds. And let's take Kerry as an example. Kerry actually, in terms of staff, since over the last 5 years, has had an increase of 43% staff numbers. It's had a budgetary increase of 67% in the last 5 years. Of the staffing breakdown, Kerry has had a 52% increase in medical staff. It's had a 44% increase in nursing and midwifery staff. So it's really, really significant numbers. 74% in patient and client care, which is the support staffs around, and 43% increase in health and social care staff. Kerry is perplexing me at the moment because in May, Kerry had one of its best performances in terms of hospital trolley management, because it is a big issue there and it has been historically poor. In May in Kerry, there were 13 days where there were 0 patients on trolleys. There were 3 days where there was 1 patient on trolleys. May was a good month, and it shows that there was a bed capacity and a management of the hospital as in the round with the very considerable extra staff that meant that there was very good management of the emergency department. And then something happened in June and it's the complete opposite. And so this is the nuance of hospital by hospital level experience. You have set out exactly why this is so important. The dignity and the safety of patients who should not be there for 24 hours, who should not be there for in excess of 6 hours, many of whom will present, only 25% of them need to be admitted and need to be managed in other pathways. But it's a particular example, and it happens to be Kerry because you were the last speaker. But I could equally speak about Cork and give you the figures for that. You weren't here in the room when I was pulling it together, but Wexford, the Count Corla. The staffing numbers have increased by 21% over the last 5 years, 22% increase in medical staff, 33% increase in nursing and midwifery, and Wexford is performing extraordinarily well with a less significant increase in resources. It has very, very low hospital trolley figures, and it has a culture in the hospital of the whole of hospital management, and it is doing really well. Now it needs more, it certainly needs more investment and it needs more support, but it is performing extremely well. Waterford Deputy Cullinan was here a minute ago, so forgive me, I just pulled it out in preparation. Waterford has an average of 0 hospital trolleys in 2025, an average of 0 hospital trolleys in 2024. It again has had a 44% increase in staff, and a very different outcome to Kerry. Vincent's in my own area, the closest Model 4 hospital to myself, has had a 35% increase in staff, a 59% increase in budget, and a really inconsistent performance. A really inconsistent performance in its A&E. A really inconsistent performance in its management of delayed transfers of care. All of these particular local nuances, they matter. The Mater Hospital, where I was last week, it's been good enough on its A&E management. It's the rest of the hospital's responsibility to support the A&E. But a couple of weeks ago, it was one of the list that were in very considerable difficulties, and it had closed the Smithfield Injury Unit for the bank holiday weekend, for which it has been paid to operate under the service level agreement. These are inconsistencies that are not acceptable and we can't stand over, but they speak to the level of detail and nuance that's necessary to understand the complexity of health budgeting and how that's being translated through to patient care on an individual basis. So I think this bill, while I appreciate this bill doesn't transform the world, it doesn't change things, but it does a couple of really important things that we need to happen, and that is in particular in relation to the CAPs, to the corrective action plans that are necessary, because they're required now the CEOs will be required to notify me or the Minister for Health of the overspend, to identify the detail of what is the cause of the overspend and how it is proposed to avoid the overspend, and then the board can review that, amend, approve proposals. The board agrees on the cause, it agrees on the actions that will eliminate, reduce overspend, and believes that they're practicable, and none of that applies at present, and so it is a different level of detail in terms of managing spend and overspend. It should not be the case that there are threats or assertions that I can't pay my pharmaceutical bill, I can't pay my revenue bill, and I must close beds. Because all of those things are completely unacceptable, outrageous responses to a failure to manage a budget. In circumstances where, for example, bills to external consultants or legal advices outside of the state structure remain being paid. Or where, for example, there haven't been evidence on non-pay savings over a 3-year period. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like taking the dead cat and saying, now, Minister, you give me a big pile of money or else. We have to be serious about hospital management. We have to be serious about money being spent in a consistent and predictable way. And we have to do that collectively and identify the instances where that is not happening. And there is, unfortunately, too much variance between hospitals, between how we think money should be spent, because we do, like the hospital, the budget now has increased. In 2013, the health budget was 13.5 billion euros. At the moment, it's 25.8 billion euros. We cannot, in a 10-year period, we have essentially doubled the health spend. We as a state can't do that again. Now, there was very significantly necessary investment. We have historically underinvested in health, particularly on the capital side, and I thank every single deputy who has made the case for a very large envelope to be given to the Department of Health and to the HSE in the review framework, recognising the difficulty of managing that process overall, because of course all of the hospitals need water. All of the hospitals need energy security, all of the hospitals need, power security. So those things are also important, but there does need to be a significant capital investment. So I appreciate the recognition of that, but we cannot continue to grow the current budget the way it has been. We have invested in people, we have invested in hospitals. We must get the return for that investment. It is not acceptable for a hospital to make the case for an additional CT machine or any other diagnostic equipment in circumstances where that CT machine is not being used all of the hours that you and I expect it to be used. It is not acceptable to have CT machines or other diagnostic equipment that is not being used beyond, 4:30 in the afternoon, which is the case in some hospitals. And I go in, I say, what time does the CT machine run till? Maybe 8, maybe 5, maybe 4:30. That's not okay. And it's not okay for the state to be required or to have pressure placed to put an additional CT machine somewhere where that isn't being used to the optimum capacity. And those are the productivity saves, those are the savings, but really the productivity that's necessary to deal with the sort of service that we want to deliver to patients. We have together a significant issue to manage, which you have identified in relation to insourcing. It is not, I believe, the correct or moral thing for the state to do, to continue a system that it knows is creating a barrier to achieving productivity in the public system. I am completely committed to a public health system funded by the state, delivered for public capacity, and that public work is done in public hospitals. I recognise that there are historical contracts that enable consultants under certain contracts to do private activity within certain spheres, and I recognise that that is so. But on the other hand, I also see that 65% of consultants are now in the public-only consultant contract, and that we want public activity. We have correctly, I think, it was the correct set of decisions to take every step possible to reduce the waiting list action plan, because that results in people getting pain relief, elective procedures, diagnostic tests that they need to have. And we have now, over the next 12 months or the next 24 months, as we decide to do this, a real challenge in how to make sure that that capacity is delivered within the hospital system. And I really would welcome the support and help of the Health Committee in particular in analysing the performance of hospitals in this way, and making sure that we are winding down a structure that we know, while it's legitimate and it's lawful, it's not what we want, it's not what we believe is the correct thing to do. But I don't want to do it in a way that's going to spike waiting lists, not because you're going to correctly hold me to account for the waiting lists. I don't want people to be in difficulties. I don't want them to be in difficulties. So we're going to have to find the right way of bringing down the activity that we do not believe serves the public interest in the medium to long term, i.e. third-party insourcing, etc., and increase productivity. Both are granular challenges that are going to be difficult, and they're complex, and I need your insight and your help and your analysis, and to use all of the tools of the Oireachtas to help analyse the nuanced performance of hospitals that I have given to you here today. Deputy Conway Walsh referenced Mayo in particular, and I'm interested in Mayo in particular because It was one of the first hospitals I visited. A very, very poor hospital trolley performance over the bank holiday weekend in early February. But it's been consistently difficult, and it has had a very significant uplift, both in resources and in staff. But I am concerned about its weekend management, and consistently concerned. And there are different, it's not to be too unfair to Mayo, but the point is there are different nuances in every hospital, and we just need to be honest about this. I think this bill is important because it helps do one thing, which is to be very, very focused on corrective action, and that is the sort of granular detail that we're going to need to improve financial performance in the health system.